Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. So I think that the choice of faculty for this conference is exactly the right one. They are at the front lines. They're the ones that are inspiring our future leaders. But the needs of what we need from faculty in the future is quite different than in the past. As Deepak talked about, faculty have actually changed over time. If you actually go back, AACSB was founded 103 years ago when business schools first started to be found within universities. And there weren't a lot of PhDs in accounting. So a lot of the faculty members were business practitioners who came into the classroom, or perhaps professors in economics who were morphing into joining the business school. But over time, we became more rigorous because we were compelled to. The inflection point was in the 1960s with Carnegie and Ford Foundation reports, where faculty were encouraged to become much more rigorous, more PhDs, more research, and we embraced that, and we've done a fantastic job in the last several decades at creating very strong researchers. The faculty of the future, though, can't be pure practitioners or pure researchers. What we need from faculty in the future is going to be quite different. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about first some trends in business and society, then some trends in business education, and what the implications of both of those are on the business school of the future and the faculty of the future. So, trends in business and society, and I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but there's a lot of change going on. Demographics are changing, people are living longer, people are working longer. We have different generations in the workforce. We've got millennials and Generation Z and baby boomers like myself all working at the same time. So we've got to manage those different levels. Technology is changing rapidly, and I'm going to drill down into that one in the next few slides. Today, there's much more of an interest in entrepreneurship. Many students want to become entrepreneurs. When I go visit classrooms, I'll ask how many of you want to own your own business someday, and usually about half the hands go up. But they're not all going to become entrepreneurs immediately, but they may down the road. Many students also are going to work for large employers. Those employers are looking for people with an entrepreneurial mindset to work within large companies. So there's a difference in that. There's a difference in the way people work. Deepak mentioned United Airlines. Well, my father worked for the single airline his entire life. Unfortunately, it was Eastern Airlines, which is one of the many who have failed along the way. But he worked there for 30 years. Who works for a company today for 30 years? You're lucky if they actually work for 30 months. They're working, in many cases, for multiple companies at the same time, multiple clients. We've got the gig economy out there that we didn't have before. So there are tremendous changes going on in business and society that we need to address. Technology is the one I want to drill into the most, though, because that's actually where most of the impact is coming from. So this is from a study that was done by some professors at Oxford, and they looked at 700 occupations, and they created an algorithm which would estimate the probability that a particular occupation would be automated out of existence. Automation, artificial intelligence, all of those things. And so I'm just giving you two of the 700. One of them has a 99% probability of being totally automated. The other has a 0.03% probability of being automated. What do you think the 99% is? Any guesses? Academics. Fortunately not. If we change, if we don't, perhaps a lot of what we do can certainly be automated. Any other guesses? Accountants, thank you. So I was an accountant by training before I became a professor. It's actually specifically tax preparers. All right, today the government can collect a variety of information, in some cases do your tax return for you, where it can be automated. What do you think the 0.03% is? It's not teachers either. Artists? Yeah, actually, I'm not. Yeah, machines can draw, elephants can draw. Creativity. All right, I'll give you a hint. It's in healthcare. Nursing, some certainly, possibly, some aspects of nursing, some aspects of... Treatment. What kind of treatment? Because I need a knee replacement, and I went to see the doctor, and he told me he's doing it robotically. So a robot's going to do most of the work. He's just going to set it up. Counseling, thank you. It's actually mental health counseling. All right, so if you think about it, it's not something a machine can do. You need empathy. Imagine if you call the suicide hotline and it says, press 1 if you're depressed, press 2 if, right? All right. You need that empathy. That's something that only a human can provide, at least currently, all right? So what is going on is many jobs are going to change. Some are going to go out of existence. Some new jobs are going to be created. But most jobs are actually going to be impacted by automation. So this is a study by McKinsey. McKinsey estimates that about 5% of the occupations will cease to exist from automation, but that 60% of the jobs out there will be at least 30% automated. So you're going to continue to do 70% of what you did in the past, but part of your job is going to go away through automation. We need to move people up a level. As with every other technological revolution, humans now have to do a higher order, more application, more synthesis. The routine tasks are going to go away. McKinsey also estimates that the countries that are going to be the most impacted are the US, Japan, China, and India, where in some cases up to 50% of the jobs are subject to automation. So it's something that we have to pay a lot of attention to. The workforce is changing. So I was an accountant by training. I started my career in public accounting, and it was a pyramid in terms of employment. So you started as a staff accountant, and if you survived, you moved up to senior accountant. If you survived, you moved to manager, and the top of the pyramids were the partners, and the rest exited along the way, typically to go to work for companies in the finance area. Today, this is actually a diagram from a public accounting firm, one of the largest 4 in the world, that shows that it's quite different today. They still have a traditional workforce, but they also have a virtual workforce, which are people working in other countries doing work overnight. So the auditors are out doing an audit, and when they go home for the day, they ship some of the analysis off to another country. They do the analysis. The next morning when they come in, it's there. They also have robots. They're doing some of that analysis. They send it to the robot does the work, sends the results back. They're also using the gig economy. So there are folks out there that they need only for certain tasks, certain projects. They bring them in. Those people are working for multiple companies. So the nature of work is changing. The structure of work is changing. The knowledge, skills, and abilities that are needed today are different. We simultaneously need to train students or learners to be both employees as well as entrepreneurs. But fortunately, a lot of the skills you need are similar. You need that innovation, that creativity for either one. You need to have that fundamental understanding of a subject matter or a product line in order to be an entrepreneur or whether to work as an employer. But how we train people is going to be much less about learning facts and lecturing than about how to actually identify a problem and solve a problem and deliver a solution. So this is a SWOT analysis that we did for business schools, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they're huge. There's a lot going on today. We're very strong in terms of pedagogy. We're very strong in terms of scholarship. We're having some challenges on the finance side. We're getting less funding from the government. It's harder to raise tuition dollars. We, as business schools, we need to keep up with technology, and that's very costly to do. So there's opportunities, but there's threats at the same time. So let's talk about our faculty today, what they look like. So, you know, our AACSB faculty model has changed over the years. When I left public accounting to go back and get my PhD, and I became a professor, and I was under the 1992 and the 2002 AACSB standards. And at the time, they were very, very much focused on scholarly academics, almost exclusively. That was the main focus of the standards. I'll tell you, I was not a fan of those standards, all right? While I was working as a professor, I had a PhD, I was tenured, I did all the publications that I needed to do, I felt it was very important to be connected to practice and that you needed to have a blend of scholarship and knowledge of practice. So in 2013, fortunately, AACSB changed the model where they introduced this 4-box model where you look at the scholarly training and activity and you look at the practitioner background as well. Today, if you look at the faculty distribution, this is of AACSB accredited schools, about 59% are what we call these traditional scholarly academics. Another 9% are what we now call practice academics. So these are people that trained with their PhD, maybe were doing research for a while, but now they're mainly doing consulting, they're working with governments, they're helping solve problems for businesses and governments and the like, and so they're primarily engaged in practice activities. We also have a large cadre of instructional practitioners. So teaching things like tax or cryptocurrency. You need to get people with those real current skills in order to teach those classes. And an emerging group are scholarly practitioners. That today is about 5% of our faculty at AACSB accredited schools. Those are practitioners who have perhaps retired from business and now come into the business school full time, and they're working with the scholarly academics to bring in the practice information and jointly produce knowledge and do publications. So that's where we are today. That's changed a little bit over the last 5 years. Over the last 5 years since we've been tracking these new boxes, we've declined about 2% in scholarly academics, and that 2% has been picked up in the instructional practitioners. So not a lot of movement. Remember, this is an average across schools. So obviously if you're an undergraduate institution that's a regional teaching focus, you may have less. But if you have a master's program, or in particular if you have a PhD program, you're going to have a lot more than this. But I look at this as a portfolio, okay? Today we need to have both the academic rigor and the practice perspective in order to be teaching a relevant curriculum. So we need to have a portfolio. Just like in finance, you don't put all of your money into one stock. You buy a basket of 30, 40 securities so that it balances your risk and gets you the maximum reward for risk. We need to have this type of balance in our faculty, and I personally think this is quite a good balance. Individual schools, it will depend upon their mission. So enrollments, I'm actually going to skip to the change because that's what's the most important. Over the last 5 years, we've seen some significant differences in the enrollments in particular types of programs. So if you look globally, for AACSB accredited institutions, undergraduate business enrollments have increased by about 10% cumulatively over the last 5 years. The MBA has increased by about 3% over that same 5-year period. That's not 3% a year, that's 3% over 5 years. Specialty masters, on the other hand, have increased by about 20%. So there's a huge demand these days, particularly in fields like accounting, finance, data analytics, to have deep specialty knowledge early in your career. So those folks have been choosing to take specialty master's programs, but they're not getting the management skills and the leadership skills. So what do you think the demand is going to be 5, 10 years down the road as they move up in their careers? They're going to need to come back for additional management and leadership skills. They may not want to come back for another master's, but they're going to come back for those skills. So I think that's going to drive a huge demand for executive education, shorter courses to top off those specialty programs. Microlearning is increasing. We're actually seeing a lot of stackable credentials where you take some individual short courses, perhaps less than the normal credit hours, and you stack them together towards a degree. Particularly people that are working don't necessarily have time to do long classes. They want to do something on their mobile device. They want to do something on their computer at lunch that they can do very quickly. Particularly the younger generation wants these bite-sized pieces to build knowledge over time, not necessarily earn it in big chunks. So there's a lot going on. We think, though, that there's a lot of opportunities for business schools. So some of the opportunities are catalysts for innovation. With this interest in entrepreneurship and innovation, even with large companies, there's a huge opportunity for business school to be hubs of innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship, to work across campus with ideas that come from engineering to help produce products and services where the business school has that ability to bring a product or service to market, but also to work with our communities. And you're seeing this in business schools all over the world, where you have incubation centers that serve both the community and the entire campus. We think there's an opportunity to be more co-creators of knowledge. So instead of doing research in our office on ideas that we have that we think are interesting, go out and work with the business community to help identify problems that they have and help solve those problems. So co-creating knowledge with the business community and co-creating knowledge across campus. So not just working within your discipline. So I was an accountant. You're not going to solve the world's problems by taking a very small accounting issue and researching it and getting an incremental change in knowledge. In order to solve the world's problems, you need to bring together the social scientists, the economists, the finance folks, and they need to work together. So we think there's an opportunity to co-create with the business community and with other disciplines as well. There's a huge opportunity to be leaders on leadership. So we need to produce leaders not just for business, but for governments, for not-for-profit organizations, and business schools have that ability to do. As was mentioned by several of the speakers today, there's quite an interest today in ethics and social responsibility. So businesses have contributed a great deal to society in the past. We need to do a better job of telling that story and making sure that our faculty are preparing students to go out and make a difference, not just to themselves and their families, but to their community and societies. The biggest opportunity is lifelong learning, okay? With what's happening in technology, people need to continuously reskill themselves. It's not one and done. You don't finish a degree and go to work and stop learning. You're learning typically within a company. Deloitte has Deloitte universities. Most companies have internal training programs, but it's not enough. In order to keep people up to date, we need to have a partnership between the business community and business schools to make sure that people are getting current skills. They're going to need to do deep dives in specialty topics when they come up. So an accountant today, if you want a job with an accounting firm, they're not looking for a traditional accountant who knows debits and credits. They're looking for people that are skilled in data analytics. So I have my master's degree in accounting. If I wanted to get a job with an accounting firm today, I would have to go back and learn data analytics. In fact, I'm actually taking a Python course right now, just in case. Lifelong learning is a huge opportunity for business schools. It doesn't necessarily mean that business schools have to offer the entire spectrum from undergraduate to executive education and all the micro-learning courses, but you have to understand that lifelong learning is important and perhaps pick your niche within the lifelong learning spectrum. What are you going to focus on, and how are you going to prepare your students to be lifelong learners when they graduate? So Clayton Christensen predicted a few years back that half of American colleges will be bankrupt in 10 to 15 years. We got about 7 more years before we'll see whether that comes true. Fortunately, he didn't actually say this about business schools. He said it about college and university as a whole. And we certainly have seen some consolidation. We've seen, for example, in some areas in states in the US, for example, where there's been consolidation. So they've merged campuses together. We've seen a number of very small liberal arts schools that have gone out of business. I think it's a little overstated, but we can't just keep doing things the same way. If we do, we may go out of business. So we need to change and future-proof the business schools. We need to prepare our business schools and our faculty so that we're not going to be one of those that's not around in 10 to 15 years. So what does the business school of the future need to look like in order to future-proof ourselves? So first, we need to embrace the concept of lifelong learning. Again, it doesn't mean we have to do all of it, but it means we have to understand that lifelong learning is important. We need to pick our place in the lifelong learning space, and we need to prepare our students for lifelong learning. We need to have a very strong partnership with business. We can't just sit in an academic silo and expect that we're going to make progress. We need to help solve real business problems today and partner with them perhaps to provide lifelong learning to their employees. We're actually seeing a lot of that today, where there's an example of there's a consortium of 15 business schools led by Bocconi University in Italy that provides all of the executive education for a global energy company, and those 15 business schools are around the world, rather than the company creating its own internal university, because we're very skilled with pedagogy. So we can partner with the business. They know sort of the content that we need to teach, but we know the pedagogy, how to help teach it. We need to leverage technology, all right? We need to use it to move some basic things out of the classroom onto the web or into microlearning, so that in the classroom we can focus on more experiential activities and more going out into the business community for experiential. So we infuse active, experiential, and project-based learning. We need to be agile and innovative. We can't just keep teaching the same programs and same classes for 5 and 10 years running. We need to foster professionalism. So professionalism, a professional is somebody that's not just out to make money. They have ethics, they have education, both initial education and continuing education, and they have experience. And we need to foster that professionalism in our students. We have to teach them how to be lifelong learners in order to keep their skills up to date. We need to get rid of the silos. We need to work across disciplines, and we need to be global. So if you look at the businesses today are global, and they're continuing to globalize. Unfortunately, countries today have moved in the other direction. They move towards consolidating or nationalizing, and so there's this tension. You simultaneously need to educate your students to work in a global environment, but also to manage the local environment as well. So we need to be global. So what does this mean for faculty? So faculty have to be lifelong learners. Okay, you can't just keep doing your research that you've been doing. You need to get up to date. You need to learn these emerging technologies. The reason I'm taking Python is that when I retire from AACSB, I intend to go back to teaching, because that's what I love to do. I can't teach today if I don't know R and Python and those things. I at least have to understand enough of it that I can teach a forensic accounting course, which happens to be my specialty. So we need to be lifelong learners. We have to be knowledgeable about what's going on in the current business practice. So even if we're a PhD who's primarily doing research, what we're seeing, for example, is business schools sending faculty out on externships where they spend a semester working with a company, and they're continuing to pay their salary. What they're doing is they're learning current business problems, and they're also identifying problems that they can come back and research. So we need to have more of that type of thing going on, where faculty are up to date with the current business environment. Faculty need to be tech savvy. They need to be as tech savvy as their students, and they're not, I can tell you. We need to be agile and innovative ourselves. We can't just be teaching from the same lecture notes that we used 20 years ago. And I've had colleagues in the past when I was in business that would do that. It's also going to be less about lecturing and more about coaching and guiding and developing our students. You move that basic knowledge acquisition into an electronic venue, and in class you're primarily working on solving problems with your students. We need to make sure that the faculty are installing professionalism, teaching our students to be lifelong learners and that they're never going to stop learning. We need to have our faculty working across disciplines, and we need to make sure that we have faculty that are providing diverse global perspectives. So in order to be global, we need to make sure our faculty have global perspectives. Doesn't necessarily mean our faculty have to be from all over the world, but our faculty have to understand the global context. So working with faculty on projects at other universities around the world, having faculty exchange programs where they get that experience in another country, just like we do for our students. So we think there are significant changes in the faculty of the future. As a former department chair, though, we often referred to managing faculty as trying to herd cats. So it's not going to be easy, but this is the direction that we're going to need to move our faculty in. Thank you.